Okay, and so I welcome you back to my very kind of wrinkly bed sheet here. This time it's time rather for some Asian cinema, as well as some miscellaneous English-speaking movies. Um, Mostly because I didn't really have enough Asian cinema to justify a whole video, or I could have made a short one, I suppose. But I'd rather add a few more things at the end. So I am going to start with some Asian cinema, and then we will just move into English-speaking cinema. No real transition here, but it's gonna have to be that way. Now, the first few that I'd like to show were actually sent to me by a viewer who I don't know if you want your name in the video, so I won't mention who you are, but I'm sure you know who you are. You sent me Shoplifters, first of all, which by the way, these I've had these for a while. You sent me these well, several weeks ago, probably more than that. So I really apologize for being so tardy with the video. I meant to do this much sooner and thank you in a video. I wanted to do it in a video, but it just took longer than I was expecting, because like I said in the last one, I tend to be the great procrastinator. Anyway, so Shoplifters, a Koreeda film. It's still sealed because I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen any of these yet. I want to wait with this one until I've finished the BFI set, which contains Afterlife, Maborosi, Nobody Knows, and Still Walking. And I haven't seen Afterlife yet. I have seen the other ones. And since I made not the last video, not part one, but the one before that, the really long one, I did show off that set in that video, and at that time I had seen Maborosi, but that was it. I then watched Nobody Knows, which I really liked. People think that it's a bit slow and a bit too long. I really like the way the film just sort of seemed to play itself out. The progression of these kids who are left by their mother, being forced to fend for themselves. I thought that the progression of their downfall, so to speak, was really well done. Especially when it, well, not especially, but for example, when it came to the I mean, I realize I'm talking about films that I'm not actually showing, but I hope that's okay. The visual representation of their deterioration, so to speak, and maybe that's not the right word, but their apartment eventually gets dirtier and dirtier, and at a certain point, the water stops working, and so on, and the landlord knocks on the door, and so the gradual progression of all this was really well done. So that I enjoyed, and then it's just a rather minimal film, not a whole lot of dialogue, not a whole lot of exposition. It just kind of exists somehow. And I felt the same way about Still Walking, in the sense that it was just a movie that, more than telling a direct plot, it just seemed to be a world that was thriving and that seemed to exist without us. Still Walking I didn't quite like as much, but there are some great subtleties in Still Walking, so I think that maybe I missed some things. But Afterlife I haven't seen yet. I'm a little bit put off by the fantasy tag on that movie, but I'm sure it's gonna be a good movie, so I just want to see Afterlife, and then I'll get to Shoplifters. I've obviously heard great things about this one, and I've liked everything I've seen so far from Koreeda. And now here's 4 third window titles, which I bought quite a few of these myself recently, but not these. So I mean, this is just very nice of you. I'm really grateful for these. Funuke, Show Some Love, You Losers. I mean, these, I don't know anything about these. The only reason why I might recognize them is because I've been scrolling online and I've seen them. I've seen the covers. but I don't know anything about the movies. Memories of Matsuko, The Foreign Duck, The Native Duck, and God in a Coin Locker, and then Love and Other Cults. So yeah, quite a few more third window titles to add to the watch piles. I mean, again, thank you so much for these. I really do appreciate it. I have two criterions here. We have The Life of Ohario, which is quite dusty, typical of in my videos. You're not gonna see an update from me without dust on some of the covers. It's just not gonna happen. This is a film by Mizoguchi. I've seen Sancho the Bailiff, I've seen Yugetsu. I love both of them, especially Yugetsu was a really devastating, beautifully filmed movie, and the same way I thought the same way about Sancho, and I thought the same way about this, although I didn't quite like this as much as those two. But it's got a really stunning opening sequence. The main actress is great, although I did feel, I mean, I believe the same actress plays the character from a really young age, and the actress was much older than that, so it didn't. I'm not sure that I felt that it worked for her to play a teenager, but because I believe she didn't she? She played the same. It was the same actress who played the character all the way through. Anyway, so maybe the passing of time. I didn't really feel the passing of time, but it's a really great character study, and it's a beautifully filmed movie. I got this Antonio Gaudi, a film by Hiroshi Teshigahara. I think he made Woman in the Dunes, or Woman of the Dunes. I'm not sure of the title exactly, but I'm so sweaty you can see the. I'm sorry about that. Right. This was an interesting film, just a sort of observational film about the artworks of this eponymous. Was he Spanish? The Spanish architect, and there's some really great structures that he made. He had this kind of, I think he worked maybe around the turn of the century, not this past century, but the one before. And so I think his style was very unique. I mean, I'm not sure that I particularly like the aesthetics necessarily, but he has this kind of curvy, gothic-looking style, and especially he made a church, or he worked on this church, this incredible structure, which I don't believe he finished. They speak about that in the film. He didn't do the whole thing himself, but it's an unbelievable structure. And I've noticed as I get older, I'm starting to look at churches in a different way. I'm starting to kind of, I don't know. I look at them and I feel like I'm moved by them, and I don't necessarily feel that way about any structure that's looming over you. But it's typically churches. I guess churches tend to be the structures that loom. They have a certain aesthetic, obviously, but I don't know if it's the aesthetic itself, or if it's the religious connotation, whatever. I'm not religious, but I do feel more connected to stuff like that as I get older. I don't know. So that sequence I quite liked. There's also a short film, a bonus film, about Teshigahara's father, who was also an artist. He was sort of a sculptor, and so he filmed his father when he was sort of installing this, moving things into this art installation, this art exhibit. And then there's some sort of interesting juxtapositions of his art and the sound, like the sounds of animals, like roaring sounds of animals, because I believe they talk about that. His father tried to get to some kind of primal nature of his art. So I thought that if you have the Blu-ray, I would say that it's worth watching the bonus film as well. Here's one that is a fucking masterpiece, mostly because of what it's showing. So it's not, I mean, it's very simple the way it's filmed. It's almost like one of those instances where they were at the right place at the right time. But I feel like saying that is taken away from the film, and obviously I don't want to do that. But The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On, filmed by Kazuo Hara. It's about this man who, decades after fighting in the war, somewhere in the Pacific, it says on the back. Yeah, I'll just read the back. He's on a mission to uncover the truth about atrocities committed as the war in the Pacific reached its bloody end. And he does this decades after the war ended. And he is a really confrontational character. I think people have described him as very un-Japanese. And he literally attacks people in some scenes because he is so desperate to get to the bottom of this mystery as to what happened in regarding a certain situation. And it's sort of this desperate struggle to get to the truth, with so much time between the event, but so much time has obscured truth that it's really hard to get to truth. And his struggle, his extreme desire to get to this is really fascinating. And there are some really wrecking scenes in this where he interviews people who may know what happened regarding this group of people and this execution, and he really wants to know exactly what happened. So he tries to track down people who might know who were there, and certain scenes with people who you feel may know more than they're telling are occasionally really tense. And there are some really emotional scenes too, where there was somebody who was executed whose siblings are alive. I believe it was this man's brother and sister who were still alive, and they're featured in the film. And this man, what was his name, Kensuo Kusaki, he brings them with him on a couple of the interviews. And there are a couple really emotional scenes. One scene in an office building where they are there's this man who they're just trying to just pull the information out of him, and they're getting emotional. And it's quite it's an incredible film. It sort of reminded me of, there's a film by Joshua Oppenheimer called The Look of Silence, about atrocities committed in the Philippines. No, sorry, in Indonesia. And similarly, in that film, there are people who clearly know more than they're saying, and they're hiding the truth. And that's a fascinating topic. There are some really graphic and gruesome details in this film, but I would highly recommend it. I got a couple DVDs here. I can just show this first. I don't actually know what this is. It's a film by Yoshi Higashi, Village of Dreams. I haven't seen this. It's a Region 1 release. I don't know anything about this. I've had this for a while. I found this at a secondhand store. Sometimes you get lucky, even with secondhand stores in my rather small town in Sweden. You can find American DVDs that are quite difficult to find. Like once I found a film called Powwow Highway, which is just ridiculously expensive online. And so you get lucky sometimes, even in this city. And so I got lucky with this. I've actually found quite a lot of Region 1 out-of-print DVDs over the years. Well, I haven't seen this one yet. I don't know what it is. If you've seen it, then I'd like to hear about it. Here's a film by the Japanese filmmaker Naomi Kawase. I'm having to pronounce and butcher a lot of Japanese names in this video. Anyway, this one, it says original title An. The Swedish title translates to Under the Cherry Blossoms, cherry trees, something like that. I don't know if there's an English. Yeah, all right. The English title of this, I just remembered, is Sweet Bean. It's a very simple film, which I quite liked. about the relationship of these two people. He has this little shop where he sells. I don't remember what it's called. I'm just gonna sort of skim over that. He sells food and makes food, a very specific kind of food involving beans, sweet beans. That this woman, she comes to visit him and she tries to convince him that even though she's old and kind of appears to be sort of arthritic, she eventually manages to convince him that she can work for him, and she's so excited about this, and she makes the best sweet bean paste or whatever, and they form a relationship, and it's just that basically. It's a very simple story. I did like it, but I will mention that this director, I've been watching a few of her earlier documentaries or diary films, where she films her life and her relatives essentially, with a video camera, and they're from the early 90s. There's one called Embracing, in which she looks for her father, which was quite moving. There's also one called, and I'm gonna butcher the name, but it's Katatsumori, I think the title was, and I'm actually scratching my sorry, I'm actually scratching my head as I say that. Anyway, which was about her relationship with her grandmother, who raised her, and she kind of ponder. Her grandmother is alive in the film, but she seems to kind of ponder with her camera what it's gonna be like when she's gone, and there are some really moving scenes in that film. So you know, I found them on YouTube. I don't know if they're available to watch anywhere else. It's, you know, I do that a lot. I watch a lot of films on YouTube, a lot of stuff that I can't find anywhere else. A lot of documentaries and foreign films and experimental films, or well, yeah, mostly that. Not really a whole lot of narrative stuff or feature-length films, because usually they are a bit easier to find on DVD or Blu-ray. I mean, it's mostly stuff that I just can't find anywhere else, and I don't download stuff. I suppose YouTube is as bad as that, when stuff is uploaded illegally or without, you know, a license to upload or whatever. But I do that. I watch things on YouTube, and I'd recommend those that I mentioned. There's one more that I saw, a couple more. I don't remember the titles, but especially those two, Embracing and Katatsumori. Now here's an anime film called Princess Arete, and unfortunately this Blu-ray suffered some damage here. You can see there's a line where I spilled some, I don't remember, I guess it must have been water, which was very, kind of sucked, and I spilled on more things as well. I just knocked something over on my coffee table where I have a bunch of Blu-ray stacked, and it was just, well, it was unfortunate. So this one suffered some damage, but the movie, it's a Blu-ray released by All the Anime, or yeah, All the Anime. There's another name for these people, this company. Well, anyway, yeah, the animation is a bit hit and miss. Some of it is really beautiful. It's mainly the story that was a little bit. It was hard to become invested in it. There are some really nice scenes in this. There are some stuff that reminded me of certain Miyazaki films, like Nausicaa or Laputa, a little bit in that direction, but you know, the story wasn't quite as gripping. But there are some nice things in this. I quite liked it. I mean, the best parts of the film are really great. It's just that it's overall a little bit lacking in terms of character development and pacing, perhaps. Here's a film called Mundane History, which I had heard a few people liking. It's a Thai film from 2010 or so, I believe. 2009. I will say that the only Thai director that I'm aware of, that I'm familiar with, is Apichatpong Verasetakul. They tend to have names that I tend to have a very difficult time pronouncing. Anucha Suvicha Kornpong. I'm sure there are people there at home kind of cringing that I'm insisting on trying to pronounce these names, but that's the way it's gonna be. This one was a fascinating film. It starts out very slow and kind of mysterious somehow about the chemistry between the characters. At least for me, it felt that way. But it is very slow and minimal for a good portion of it. It's a pretty short film overall. It's not even 80 minutes. I think it's 78 minutes. Then it sort of takes a turn halfway through, and it does some interesting things involving the film language. Experiments quite a lot with certain effects and superimpositions at one point, and then there's a really the ending could be considered very very depressing, but also very optimistic. It's completely up to how you see the film, but it's yeah, seems to be a lot about sort of rebirth and life and death and your place in the universe and your part in all of it. And it's quite moving. I mean, everybody doesn't seem. There seem to be some people who didn't quite like it, and I do feel like maybe the characters could have been a bit more fleshed out. But I just felt that what the movie did in the end, like the last, I don't know, the last half hour or the last 20 minutes, I don't exactly know how long it would have been, but it just did something so utterly unique and really moving. And so that last scene on itself, the last scene is very simple, but after everything else that has happened, it starts to feel well. I'm gonna leave it at that. It's kind of hard to talk about, but I would warmly recommend this film. Now, in the video that I made after my 15-month absence, I had a bunch of third window films, not these, but a bunch of other ones that I had bought myself, and a few of them were Shinya Tsukamoto films. And I still have a couple of those that I haven't seen. I did watch Tokyo Fist out of those, and I didn't love it, but I liked it. I still have Bullet Ballet and A Snake of June, which I haven't seen. But I also bought this, and this one sort of went ahead in line because I have seen all of these. It's a release of 3 films: Haze, Killing, and The Adventure of Denshu Koso. This one was, I mean, this is the director who made Tetsuro, the Iron Man, and Denshu Koso came out a couple of years before that, and you can see the similarities in visual style and in themes, and this is just batshit crazy. This has so much effects that, I mean, I would have to pause and rewind and watch the same scene a few times to actually catch everything that's happening. I don't even know how much time he would have spent on this or how much effort would have gone into it, but there is so much going on that it's just he seemed to have been really passionate about creating this film, because there's a lot that he threw into it. It's wonderful. I loved it. These other two, Haze, so I could mention that this is from 86, I think, 1986, around that time. And these other two are a bit newer. Well, this one is from 2004, I think, so around the time that Saw came out, a few years after Cube came out. And I mentioned those movies because it shares some similarities. Tsukamoto, he often stars in his films himself. And he does so in this as well, as a man who mysteriously wakes up in a very cramped room, very claustrophobic space, and he doesn't know who he is or how he ended up there, and he tries to fight his way out, but the more he tries to get out of this place, the worse it gets. And then that's not the whole, that's like half the film, and then some more things happen at the end. These two, by the way, Denshu Koso and Haze, they are quite short. They are actually not even 50 minutes each. Killing, from 2018, I think, is longer, but it's also quite short. It's about 80 minutes. So overall, this is just 3 hours, so you can finish this in an evening if you want. Well, Killing is his take on a samurai film, and it's really intense. In some moments, some parts is really quite intense. There is a fight sequence in the middle of the film, or maybe towards this, maybe a little bit into the second half, which is really well done. There's some great acting from the two young actors who apparently are very famous in Japan. I may have seen them in something else before, I don't quite know. But they were fucking great. I mean, Tsukamoto himself is in this one too, and he's good. But the two young actors, they just they really blew me away in this. So yeah, my favorite out of these was Denshu Koso. But Haze and Killing, they were brilliant films too. So I mean, this was a great set. I think, I mean, I was a little bit disappointed that the Arrow set of Tsukamoto's films wasn't gonna be released in the UK. Obviously, the reason for that is because Third Window has the rights, but they have released all the movies in the UK as well. It's just that the Arrow set seems to have some bonus features that are exclusive to that set, as you could perhaps imagine. I know there's a new kind of career-spanning interview with Tsukamoto on that set, which is not included in any of the Third Window releases, I wouldn't think. But the movies themselves are available in the UK, and so, you know, I decided to go for those. They have just released, or are about to release, I'm not quite sure exactly, the film Gemini. So I'll be getting that as well. I've liked everything so far that I've seen from Tsukamoto. Kotoko is the other one that I've seen, which might be overall my favorite. But yeah, anyway, so great director, and that is the end of the Asian films. And so now we move on to some English language films that I just, for the hell of it, I ordered in chronological order, or essentially, I mean, there may be a little bit of an inconsistency, but essentially the oldest one here is from 67, I think, around that time, and then the newest one is just a couple years old. So we're gonna start from the 60s and work ourselves up, because why the hell not? They're not all American films, but they are all English-speaking films. So this is one called In Cold Blood, which stars Robert Blake and Scott Wilson. Scott Wilson here, from The Walking Dead. You might know him. I don't remember his name, but he was in The Walking Dead. He's dead now, but I know that I saw a couple seasons of The Walking Dead that he was in. But the reason why I wanted to watch this, well, as far as him being in it goes anyway, was because I had recently, before seeing this, I had recently seen the film The Ninth Configuration, which I just love that film. It's great, and it's got a great ending and a great performance by Scott Wilson. I pointed at Robert Blake when I said that. No, Scott Wilson is right there. And he's great in this too. And Robert Blake as well. Truman Capote wrote this. It's the story. I think isn't this a real, true story of a callous murder based upon the best-selling novel by Truman Capote. So yeah, it's about these two guys sort of going on a killing spree, or, well, I'm not sure if you would call it a spree exactly, but they're on the run essentially, and they've committed murders along the way. And the way the film tells their story in terms of editing, and it's just really great, and the cinematography is phenomenal. I would love for this to get maybe it has a Blu-ray release in the US, maybe. I don't think it does in the UK, because I think that if it did, I would have bought that. But I found a DVD at least, and I was really happy to watch this, because it's an excellent movie. Really, really great. I mean, it's one of those movies that I've been itching to watch it again ever since I saw it. I can't I can't seem to justify rewatching movies too often when I have so many new ones. But If they released a Blu-ray, then I would be able to justify it, because then it's a new release into my collection. Anyway, this is it's a fantastic film. I would highly recommend it. Then we got a film called John and Mary from 1969 with Dustin Hoffman and Mia Farrow as John and Mary. Sort of about it's a very simple story. They have I think a one night stand. It has to have been, right. I don't remember the exact details, but I think so. They get together and then they part, and then it's sort of about what they go through after, whether or not they want to see each other again. It's a film of its time. Like, it's from 1969. The themes and the way it delves into the psyches of these two people in terms of sex and relationships feels very much of its time to me. But that's not always a bad thing. It's a charming thing, that of its time thing. Anyway, that was so eloquent. Well done. Well, okay, so this was again very simple, but I liked it in all its simplicity, and considering that I don't think I've heard people talking about it too much anyway. It's not one of the great films of the new Hollywood era, but it was better than I thought it was going to be, honestly. Now, here's a film called Electra Glide in Blue with Robert Blake as well. He's really good in this. This is a... When is this from? I gotta look at the back. 1973. It's I don't know how to describe it. It's like I suppose, I mean, it looks like it takes place somewhere maybe in the southwest, maybe. Well, it has to be California, right? Maybe that's not considered the South. Well, anyway. So you got this very familiar landscape, which I always like in American films when films take place in that desert area. I always liked that location. And so you got that, and then you got them, Robert Blake and some other guy, I guess maybe Billy Greenbush is the other guy on the cover. I don't know who it is. But you got this group of police officers on motorcycles, kind of watching the streets and so on. So you got like not really a road movie thing going on, but sort of a road movie feeling. You got action, you got a thriller aspect, and it's like a mix of different things. And I did feel when I was watching it that it didn't completely come together, but there are some really great scenes. There's a chase sequence which was really fun. There's a scene involving this kind of, in lack of a better term, this group of hippies in the kind of swamp area. It's not really a swamp, but in the kind of I'm struggling to think of the right word, but in the somewhere outside of town, whatever. So there's a lot of great scenes in this, and then you got this mystery going for it as well. The movie starts with a killing, and you don't really know how the killing would have happened, and then the movie gets into that as well, but it's not really a detective movie. It doesn't really solve that mystery in a way that you would maybe expect based on the way the movie opens. But so it's a mix of different things, and it's directed by a guy. Oh, I can't look. What's his name? Oh, right here. Director James William Grisho. Sorry. Who hasn't seemed to direct it a whole lot more than this. Based on what I remember when I looked it up, but the movie is very entertaining. I would love to watch it again. It's not a perfect movie, but it's one of those movies from the new Hollywood era that I knew about and that I hadn't seen and that I was intrigued with. So yeah, it's good. Then we got a little someone called Dirty Harry. The Dirty Harry collection. I had never seen these before. There's a lot of Clint Eastwood films, especially his 70s and 80s films that I haven't seen, and a lot of well, actually a lot of the 60s ones as well. And these ones I had never seen. I was never really that interested in them, but I asked for this for Christmas 2019, so it's been a little while, and I had a really good time going through this. Um, Dirty Harry, the first one, I suppose, is perhaps the best one. It's directed by Don Siegel. It stars or co-stars. See if I can think of his name. Andrew Jackson, I think maybe his name was, who was also in Charlie Varick, directed by Don Siegel, which is where I he was actually in Hellraiser as well, so that's sort of the thing that I know him from the most, because that's what I've seen him in the most. But Charlie Varick, he was, I mean, it's a much earlier film, so he's much younger, and it's a different kind of performance. And I just thought that Charlie Varick was such a great film, and he was so great in it, that, and the fact that Don Siegel directed that and Dirty Harry, then that became a reason for me. Okay, maybe I should finally watch the Dirty Harry movies, and I'm glad that I did, because I had a really good time with them. Magnum Force and the Deadpool were probably my least favorite, to be honest. I really enjoyed the Enforcer. It was kind of goofy. Sudden Impact had a really kind of eerie atmosphere. Kind of almost felt like a slasher in some ways. So I would say that Sudden Impact was a close second to Dirty Harry, just based on enjoyment. And the Enforcer was my third favorite out of these. And then, but it's a great set. Like, it takes up so little space on the shelf, but it contains so much content. Like, there are so many documentaries here and commentaries and just so much good stuff. So this is really good value. Here's a film that I, again, would love to see a Blu-ray release of. Maybe there's one in the US, but there's not one in the UK. Well, I want to say maybe the Premium Collection released this, but I could be mistaking that. I could be mixing it together with something else. With the Premium Collection, HMV doesn't ship internationally, so I don't really pay too much attention to those releases, to be honest, because I can't really get them anyway. Straight Time, a film with Dustin Hoffman, which he was heavily involved with the making of, I think. Who directed this? It says directed by Ulu Grossbard. I believe at one point Dustin Hoffman was supposed to direct this himself. Like I said, he was heavily involved in the production of this film. And by the way, something that I notice when I look at the filmographies of method actors of the 70s, like Dustin Hoffman and Al Pacino, this might be like no news to anyone, but not too long ago, when I looked at their filmographies, I found myself sort of surprised how few movies they made in the 70s and 80s. It feels like they made dozens of movies, but there were years apart between movies at some points in both their careers in the 70s and 80s, which is really fascinating. So clearly they really went all in with the method acting into the movie that they were making at this time, and I suppose Straight Time would be one of those. You really can tell that he's invested in the character. It's a great heist film. It's got that feeling of the new Hollywood movies, like I don't know, Scarecrow or Serpico or I don't know, French Connection. I like those kinds of movies. This is a great one. Got some really thrilling scenes involving heisting or whatever, and chasing. Basically some cool chase sequences and heist sequences, and it's just a fun movie. It's just a great, really well made movie that I think people will like. I'm sure people have seen it, but for the people who haven't, if you like those kinds of movies that I mentioned, I Straight Time was a great movie. I really had a lot of fun with it. Now we move into Scotland, but it has a couple of American actors. This is a film by Scottish director Bill Forsyth, who directed a film called Housekeeping, which Indicator released, and I really liked Housekeeping. and so I wanted to see Local Hero. I heard through Twitter a while back, or before the Blu-ray was released, that Bill Forsyth had recorded a commentary with Mark Kermode, and I was sort of guessing, I was assuming that Indicator was going to be the one releasing that Blu-ray as well, but they didn't, obviously. This is Film 4 or 4 Film. I don't know really what this label is or what this company is, but it's a really good release. It's got a commentary with the two of them, like I mentioned, and then there is a new interview with Bill Forsyth and some more featurettes. It says extras running time, actually 225 minutes, which I have to assume is including the commentary. I don't, yeah, it has to be. Yeah, it's this American guy, Peter Riegert. He goes from America to this small Scottish sort of this fishing village, I guess, which I always love those kinds of villages. It reminds me of the village in, I think it's in Cornwall, in the TV series Doc Martin. I mean, it's not in the same area of the United Kingdom, but it looks the same to me, and I love those kind of quaint small little seaside villages that are sort of located around a bay. And so that's what you have here. He goes to this kind of village, or this town, to try to convince the townspeople to move in exchange for money, so that they can get oil from there, build some kind of factory with in regards to oil making or oil production, or that kind of thing. I should have had a better grasp on what they were actually looking for, but it involves oil. Anyway, I don't really care too much about that aspect. It's a film about eccentricities and about somebody who is at first kind of fish out of water, or he's out of his element. He meets these people who appear rather eccentric. There are a lot of really fun gags in this. Like, there's one scene where there's somebody who is, well, very what's the word? Very briefly, there's a man in a sort of a building. There's somebody on the roof. They're hammering away. They're working on the roof. He asks them to stop because he needs to conduct a meeting. And then later on in the film, he's there with a woman, and they're about to, and then he sort of stops it for a second, and then kind of reaches out of the window or whatever, and says to the guy upstairs, "Okay, you can start now again." Which is just a great gag. And there's a bunch of those things in this. A lot of really fun gags. And to be honest, I mean, they're pretty obvious, but a lot of them somehow, when I was listening to the commentary, watching the movie again with them, or at least most of it, some of the gags, they seemed to be more clever the second time around. So it could be one of those films that are actually, in all its simplicity, or it seems to be quite simple, I'm sure there are layers that present themselves to the viewer upon repeated viewings, even though it's not a complicated film. In fact, Mark Kermode seems to be such a huge fan of this film. He knew everything about it, and I was curious about what he thought the best films were ever made, and he had Local Hero as an honorable mention. So that's quite interesting. I would say that I probably liked it equal to Housekeeping. They're both really fun movies, and he's made a few more that I would like to see. There's one called Gregory's Girl, I think, which maybe will be the next one. Okay, here's one called Bad Boy Bobby, which I had a DVD of, and now I have the Blu-ray. The exact same release from, is it Atlantic? No, it's Nuta Films, which is a Swedish company. They release a lot of genre films on DVD and Blu-ray. So there's a lot of movies that, thanks to them, have been released in Sweden, but not necessarily with a lot of great special features. But anyway, this one I had seen before. Like I said, I just wanted to upgrade to the Blu-ray because why not? This was cheap. It's often referred to as a very, very disturbing film, but I think that's mainly because of the first half hour, which is quite bleak and gritty, and involves a couple scenes with a couple scenes with a cat, which a lot of people would find unpleasant. Um, but I believe it plays into the whole character study of this man who has been locked into this. By the way, is this a New Zealand film? I think it might be a director from New Zealand, maybe Australia. I'm sorry, I don't really know. Um, but this man, he's what, 35 maybe, and he's been living in this inside his whole life, and he hasn't been allowed to go out because his mother, this extremely, well, this sadistic bitch, really, she has kept him inside for all his life, telling him that he can't go outside because there's nuclear waste or whatever, which is why she's wearing this thing when she goes out, just to fool him that he has to stay inside. And he is completely controlled. He is like a child. He's more naive than most children. He is just completely unaware of the world, of the outside world. And then one day he kind of gets out and he sees the world for the first time. And there are some really moving scenes. There's one scene right after he gets out, which I found really moving the first time around, and I still do, where there's this choir. You hear this choir, and he walks up to the choir. Just there's like a row of people singing, and he just walks up to each one of them, looking at them, studying their face, and just walks by. Just some really nice scenes in the film, but it is a bit of a tough watch in some ways. But I think it's more than anything. I think it's a moving film. Um, Another film that I didn't like, it's called Youth. Michael Caine, Harvey Keitel, Rachel Weisz, Paul Dano, Jane Fonda, all-star cast. It doesn't really matter if the film is uninspiring. To me, this was, I I don't know. Some films you just don't get. You just have a hard time with them, and um, there were a few scenes of kind of I don't know, some kind of magical realism, some kind of low fantasy element going on, which took me out of the story. And Paul Dano plays his typical annoying character. I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't really like it. I wish I could be more eloquent about it. I just didn't like it. Freeheld. Julianne Moore, Ellen Page. This is starts as a very moving film about these two women who has 20 years apart. They meet, they fall in love, and I really liked it. And then it takes a different turn. It takes more of a turn towards the political side of things in terms of not exactly legalizing gay marriage, but it's sort of in that area. It's about achieving justice for gay people, because there was she gets sick in the film, and then they're trying to fight the system so that she can inherit the house, I think it was. And it turns into a sob story. Julianne Moore plays a character who sort of feels like a character designed to be Oscar nominated more than anything, and just seemed to be a very one-dimensional film and not very interesting after this turn. I would have much preferred a film about the two of them, their relationship, rather than a political film. I just didn't really care for that turn. So unfortunately, that's I like the first half hour, not so much the rest. Then the last film, The Beach Bum. I got this from Amazon Germany because it was cheap, and I love his previous film, Spring Breakers. This one I liked, but there didn't really seem to be a lot of layers in this in the same way that I thought Spring Breakers had. There is a pretty funny element of using this very typical kind of bouncy, quirky music, which I've always had such a hard time describing, but it's a very kind of recognizable, easygoing kind of music that when you hear it, you know what it is. But it's used during scenes where you would normally not hear this music, and so there's a kind of funny dichotomy, or, well, juxtaposition between the two, which it's funny, and there are funny scenes in this, but overall it's sort of a little bit unmemorable compared to Spring Breakers and Gummo and Julian Donkey Boy. It might be one of those films that will grow on me as I keep watching it. I don't know. Okay, sorry, I was cut off. I had to delete some things from my phone. But I was done anyway. There may have been a few things that I was going to say about the beach bum, but I don't think so. I think I was done. So that's it for this video. So these videos, they've turned out to be a little bit longer than I was anticipating. But whatever. The next one is most likely going to be a bit shorter. I'm going to talk about some horror movies. And that's it. And I don't have a ton of them, but I have a pretty good stack of them. So horror is going to be the next one. So stay tuned for that. And thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.